So today we're going to be talking about Kaeya, the most underrated character in Genshin. Just because he's a free character that you get at the start of the game, a lot of people tend to overlook him and his potential. However, he is an incredibly accessible unit and also extremely versatile. He's available to everybody because you get him for free at the start of the game, and he can fit the role of your main DPS. Your sub DPS. Do you need a cryo element applier? He's here. Do you need a particle orb generator? He's got you covered. Whatever you need Kaeya to do, Kaeya will be there to do it. He is so versatile, I kind of don't really know where to start with this, so we're gonna start with how my Kaeya is built. I run my Kaeya as a physical main damage dealer. Like a main DPS or a sub DPS, it depends on how I feel that day. I originally built him to be a sub DPS for my C0 Tortellini here, because whenever his E is down, I just swap to Kaeya and whack them, you know? Their synergy is so good together. But even though I built him as a sub DPS, he can totally hold his own as a main DPS, and I kinda do that anyways, not gonna lie. Sometimes I'm using my Child and Kaeya together, and Child's the sub DPS and Kaeya's the main DPS. You know, it's like that sometimes. He can really flex into whatever role you need him to do. And as for weapons, I use him on the Black Sword. Now, he could be run with pretty much anything. Primordial Jade Cutter is probably his best weapon because, duh, it's a 5-star. Or Aquila Favonia if you run him as a physical DPS like I do. But Black Sword, super good on him for the normal and charge attack bonus. And the sustain. Festering Desire, just good. It just gives you more damage, your ult's always up. There's no problems with it. The Flute, I don't like this weapon, but it's still good. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that I would rather use something like the Black Sword or Festering Desire before I wanted to use the Flute, and that's why it's also on Chi-Chi. Smoj for Chi-Chi. Or Favonius, which we'll talk about later. And the prototype Rancor weapon, probably his best free-to-play option, because it has the physical damage bonus substat, a decent passive, and high base attack. I think the base attack of this weapon is the same as the Black Sword, so he'll get 510 base attack from it at level 90. Which is poggers! And everyone has this weapon because you get it whenever you level up in Adventure rank. So if you fed it into something else, why? Why? You should have it. If you don't, good luck getting a prototype on a boss drop. Now, artifacts. I run Kaeya on 2 Bloodstained, 2 Cryo, because first off, that's what I had. And I really like the balance between good, solid physical damage on his auto attacks, and just a little boost in damage for his E and Q. That way, if I do use him as a main DPS, his E and Q still do meaningful damage and they're not just pitiful, right? I run him with attack, physical damage, and crit damage on his Timepiece, Goblet, and Mask, and with a focus on crit damage, attack percent, recharge, all that nice stuff, yeah? And as far as crit rate to crit damage, I'd say anything above 40% is solid enough for him, because if you run him with double cryo, the extra crit rate that you get from the cryo resonance is really nice, and helps him a lot with not needing as much crit rate in his artifacts. So you don't need as good of quality of artifacts for him in terms of, you know, the perfect crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, recharge that you'd want on everything. Sadly, we don't live in that world. There's a world where flat defense exists. So, yikes. Oh, and if you manage to pull some Kaeyas on the standard banner and you just kind of saw it, knew that he was a free unit, and just brushed it off and ignored it, his C1 is actually really good because it increases the crit rate of his auto attacks on anyone that's affected by cryo. So basically, if you just ult and then start auto attacking, that's free 15%. That's free 15% crit rate. His other constellations are also good. Look, he turns into an Abyss Mage. His ult's always up. His ult's always up even more. And then, you know, talent scaling. It's kind of surprising how much potential Kaeya has that's locked behind his Constellation 1. So if you have that, you should probably use him. And it really makes him a good main DPS dealer. Now as for ideal artifact sets, I like 2 Bloodstain, 2 Cryo, but if you're going physical damage, you probably want to go 2 Bloodstain, 2 Gladiator, or 2 Bloodstain, 2 Noblesse, or even 2 Wanderers, or just 3 off pieces, you know? It really varies from person to person what good artifacts that you have available that will determine how you build him. But that's just what I would recommend is Blizzard, Bloodstained, or Bloodstained and Glad. Now, talent-wise, you really want to focus on these auto attacks. Like, they slap. He hits hard with these autos. And for what? He just exists and hits hard. His scaling at level 8, you see these numbers? For a sword user, I'm pretty sure he has the highest auto attack scaling for a sword user. And if you compare this to Kaching and her auto attack scaling, Kaeya's is way higher, minus the bloated charge attack damage multiplier that she has. But her normal auto chain does not hit nearly as hard as Kaeya's. And yes, Kaeya has slightly lower auto attack speed, but when you hit 8k with an auto attack from Kaeya on a crit, it feels good. It's nice. But yeah. Oh, also 4-piece Blizzard, it can be really good for him with the extra crit rate against enemies affected by cryo. I just find it really hard to get good cryo pieces. Like, this is a miracle. This feather is a miracle of a piece. I don't know how I dodged, you know, the curse, but, you know, poggers. And now, some good team comps for Kaeya as a main DPS. Run this man with Xingqiu if you have him. He is so good. They are so good for each other. With a Xingqiu with a lot of energy recharge for high ult uptime, of course. The perpetual freeze that you get from Kaeya and Xingqiu paired together is so nice. Especially if you run him with Fischl for Superconduct, and you just bump up Kaeya's damage output. It's nuts. Oh, I never showed this. This is what my Kaeya's stats look like at level 80 with a level 90 black sword. 56, 166 crit rate to crit damage, which is 30 more if I have cryo resonance on a cryo applied target, which is really nice. 54 recharge, and then a physical damage bonus, and then a little bit of cryo damage bonus. And as for healers, you can't go wrong with using Bennett on any team comp. Like, he's just good, right? You could also use Chi-Chi if you have her and you like to use her, which I don't, but you know, she's here. And then there's Diona, who is amazing to use all the time, and I honestly prefer Smoj for Chi-Chi. Smoj. Another team comp I really like to use is Kaeya main DPS with Albedo, because my Albedo is probably my best built unit. It's free, turrety damage, which is the kind of thing that I like in this game. I like characters that you just kind of swap in, you do your thing, and then you swap to your DPS. Here's his stats, if you wanted to know. And I run Kaeya with Albedo with Xingqiu, and then Diona for healer. Because even though Albedo's E, his Isotoma procs will shatter the enemies, I don't really mind it, because they'll just get refrozen and it does a lot of bonus damage. So I won't argue with it. And honestly, you could run Kaeya with any supports that you would like Sucrose, but if you're running a main DPS Kaeya with a physical damage bonus cup, you probably want to run him with someone that's Electro as a support like Fish, or Bido, or Lisa. Razor is not a support, you know? So, just because the Superconduct helps his damage output so much. Now, if you wanted to run Kaeya as a main DPS and revolve around freeze comps, you could. You could run him with Changyan and Xingqiu as supports. Now, I personally don't really like I don't like how that team feels when I play it, because you have to play around staying inside of Changyan's E and not getting out of it for the cryo stem, and you lose a lot of your main damage from auto attacks if you're not having that cryo stem. And it also requires a 4-piece blizzard set with a lot of crit damage, which is kind of hard to farm, right? It's hard getting good 4-piece sets. I hate it so much. And I farmed a 4-piece set for my child, and I got that before I even got a decent 2-piece cryo set, you know? It's very RNG centric, but if you have the artifacts to run that and you like playing around Changyan's E, that's a really good comp, and I just don't have the stuff to pull it off, right? And I don't play it very well. Now, if you want to run Kaeya with a cryo damage cup and make him into more of a sub DPS with a focus around cryo damage, I would recommend I probably wouldn't run him on the Black Sword, right? Because this is a weapon that you want to put on a main damage dealer. And if you're trying to run Kaeya as a sub DPS, you probably don't want him with this. And I would probably run him on Festering Desire. This is what I would run on my Kaeya if I were focused around his cryo damage, his cryo application, and fitting into that more support / sub DPS-y role. And I use those terms kind of interchangeably, so yeah. You could run him on Flute, even though that's just more attack percent, right? That's just more damage. Or Favonius, which we'll also talk about later again. Or Sack Sword, which is also actually really nice if you wanted to generate cryo particles for your team. And you're trying to build a Chi-Chi ult because she never gets her ult up. You could just E, swap to Chi-Chi, E on Kaeya again if it procs Sack Sword, and then, she has her ult. I hope. Oh, you could even run Skyrider Sword if you don't have anything, if you don't really care about the damage so much as the cryo application. I would say that's what this sword is used for, and that kind of Kaeya build is used for, is if you need cryo application, but you don't so much need damage. Like you're trying to break Electro Fatui shields. Or whatever. Yeah? And as for artifacts, you definitely want 2 Blizzard at least if you're going to be running him cryo damage based, because it'll give you that boost, the cryo goblet, and try to balance his crit rate and crit damage to about 1 to 2. Like, crit rate, half of crit damage, you know? Or my standards at least are above 50, I like. So I swapped my Kaeya over to a crit rate hat, which isn't even plus 20, it's only plus 18. And he's sitting at 54, 131. And the reason is because this doesn't proc on his it doesn't proc on his E or his Q. And I don't know if Cryo Resonance does either. Does it? Where is it? Cryo Resonance. Crit rate. Okay, this is Cryo Resonance is just general crit rate, so you'll still get this on your E and Q. Kaeya's Constellation won't. So you want to build more crit rate in the instance that you're building him as a sub DPS / support. And as for team comps that make Kaeya a great sub DPS is if you're running a physical damage Fischl, so Kaeya can proc Superconduct, or Razor, because Kaeya can proc Superconduct, or even if you're running a physical Xinyan, because he can be the cryo applier for Superconduct and for Melt, or as a sub DPS for characters like Xiao. I would build more battery based for Xiao. For Diluc, you just want to ult as often as possible so that you can ult and combo the E for constant melts with Diluc. And even DPS Bennett with Kaeya's sounds really good because you can just constantly proc those reactions. Now, Kaeya as a battery, which is the next part, and which pretty much requires either a Favonius or a Sack Sword. Sack Sword if you're batterying for someone that's cryo like Chi-Chi, or Favonius if you just need to battery for a character. Now, essentially you just want to E and then swap to the one you want to build ult charge on. That's the basics of a battery, and for battery Kaeya with Favonius, you just want to crit as much as humanly possible to generate orbs for your team. Specifically for whatever character you need an ult on. And you want to build as much crit rate as you can fit to proc this passive every time it's up. And it's really good for characters like Xiao or Razor, who don't generate particles while in their ults forms or stances or whatever you want to call it, just so that they have more uptime, which overall brings up the uptime of your entire DPS from your team, yeah? And although this is good, but I would still prefer to have this on characters like Diona to do, or Bennett with Favonius Sword even. It's just, I find that Kaeya is better suited to the damage-centric role, and I would rather leave the orb generation to my non-offensive characters, who are there to do more supporty stuff like heal and generate particles. But this is still really good, and it's by no means a bad way to build Kaeya, because everyone could use. There is no situation in which having more ults up is a bad thing, yeah? Being able to ult off of cooldown and rotate your characters in a way that makes sense for you and output a bunch of damage, that's Pog. And it's also really nice to build the Favonius weapons on someone like on Kaeya, since Cryo, the way that MiHoYo has kind of framed it is that Cryo is a crit rate centric element, and they tend to have a lot of crit boosters. So it really helps if you're trying to revolve around weapons like the Favonius set that are all about just critical hitting and not so much about damaging, yeah? Yeah, man, I love Kaeya. He's such a good unit. And nobody wants to like use him. It makes me confused because this team comp is he's just fun. And even with a weapon like Festering Desire, he hits hard. You don't need weapons like the Black Sword or the Jade Cutter to do lots of damage with Kaeya, which is one of the things that I really like about him, because his scaling's so high. His auto attack scaling is really high for, first off, a 4-star unit, and second off, a free character that you get at the start of the game, and that you have from day one. It's just so sad that because he is a free unit, nobody wants to take a second look at him. Everyone memes on Amber, but Amber even gets more attention as a unit than Lisa or Kaeya, and Kaeya's actually good. Kaeya's actually a good unit, and Amber is, well, Smoge. Now, that's all I have to say about Kaeya, Genshin's most underrated unit. He is so strong on his own as a main DPS, he's strong as an offensive-based sub-DPS, he's strong as a non-offensive sub-DPS, or I guess that's a support. A non-offensive sub-DPS is kind of just a support. As a support, or a battery, or as a cryo-applier, but everyone wants to overlook him because he's free. But if you have a use for him in any of your teams, you have a gap that you're looking to fill, and need a unit to build for that, Kaeya's fun to use, he hits hard, he's versatile, you could build him however you want, you could probably slap whatever, give him 4 Noblesse, and make him a ult-bot Noblesse user to boost your team. Either way, Kaeya is a king, and that's on that. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and consider liking the video and subscribing if it helped you, or if you enjoyed it, or, I don't know, you like Kaeya stans, like, comment, subscribe. Also, I'm gonna try uploading more often, instead of, once a month. And I don't know where 200 of you came from, but hey, thank you. Seeing the notifications and replying to comments really brings a smile to my face. It makes me happy. I love it. So, thanks again for watching. Consider sticking around and subscribing. And bye-bye!